Welcome to Labor Goes to the Movies with me, Chris Garlock, director of the DC Labor Film Fest, and of course, my sister in Cinematic Solidarity, Elise Bryant, executive director of the Labor Heritage Foundation. Our guests this week are Peter Pocock, former SEIU staffer. He's now a Buddhist monk. Also, Evan Papp from Empathy Media Lab. He's a colleague of mine at the Labor Radio Podcast Network. This is our first Labor Goes to the Movies film club meeting, if you like. And if you want to join us for our next one, all you got to do is love movies. And if you're watching or listening, then you're already in. And also be interested in talking about them from a work and workers' point of view. How do you do that? Email us, laborgoestothemovies@gmail.com. We'll put that link in the show notes. On today's show, we discuss My Darling Supermarket, Identifying Features, Quo Vadis, Aida and Collective. So we'll have some trailers in the show as well, so you can check those out. And I hope you enjoy the conversation. It, as usual, goes in some interesting and unexpected directions. So grab your popcorn, sit back and relax, enjoy the show.
Their tanks are getting closer and closer by the hour.
We are doing everything we can. Aircraft are on standby and ready to launch an attack on all positions held by the Republika Srpska Army.
What will happen if the planes don't come?
They will come. They will come.
Ljudi, baza je puna. Niko više ne može ući u bazu.
Republika is a safe area under protection of the United Nations.
Kao čovek, kao general, garantujem sigurnost za svakog nevinog.
Do you have your family here?
2 sons. Do you think we are safe here? The Serbs are inside the base fully armed.
What? Get uniform.
Mi smo civili.
Pa s kim ratujemo 4 godine, jebem vam majku vam jebem. Sve civili.
Preživjeli 3,5 godine rata, preživjet ćemo i ovo.
Šta će biti s nama?
Ne znam.
Ja ako ostane glud umrijeću, ja moram bježati odavde.
Vesme, možeš mu povesti moje sinove iz baze?
I da ubiće i Srbija koji nađu. Ubiće i mene.
Samo bez panike i propustite malu djecu i žene. Škarci, nadamo mi stranu.
Hajde, odmah.
Ljudi idu tamo gdje je bezbije.
They are killing people outside.
Dogovor je bio!
I don't know where my family is. Svidio moje. Darik, svidio moje. What will happen to us?
Eu gosto do que eu faço. Eu não vejo que eu faço uma coisa igual todos os dias.
Acho que a vida das pessoas aqui não é muito interessante. Interessante pra quem? Por quê?
Algo mais? Eu não me vejo uma pessoa normal, entendeu? Me vejo uma pessoa diferente. Porque eu vejo que as pessoas fazem tudo do mesmo jeito todos os dias e não questionam nada.
Tá saindo de lá agora os dois. Olhou
olhou só o preço, tá descendo aí pra frente de loja novamente. Pegou alguma coisa lá do outro lado. Eu gosto de suspense, mas que tem investigação. Séries policial, difícil ter uma que eu não já assisti.
Essa é a minha ideia, ir a fundo e realmente descobrir o que é a verdade, montar o quebra-cabeça.
Ah, como você é bobo, Rodrigo. Ai, meu Deus.
Eu vi, cara, na hora que ele falou com você. Algo mais?
Deixa eu falar alguma coisa?
Somos eternos insatisfeitos na condição humana.
A gente às vezes nasce no país errado. Você já teve esse sentimento?
Mistério é mistério. Não tem como provar.
Pensa que está livre, mas de certa forma está preso a algo. Acho que é o pão de queijo.
E eu fui pra cima. Eu falei, não, deixa eu entrar, vou quebrar a cara desse cara.
Acho que você tá assistindo Scooby-Doo, hein? Scooby-Doo.
Yo ando buscando a mi hijo. La última vez que lo vi fue hace 2 meses. Mi hijo desapareció cuando tomó un camión que iba para la frontera.
Indícame si reconoce algo.
Yo sé el empaque. Le digo que a mi hijo lo asaltaron.
No ande preguntando esas cosas en público. No sabe quién la puede escuchar.
You have been found guilty of improper entry into the United States of America. You're now in removal procedures.
¿Cuánto hace que las cosas están así?
Ando con cuidado, carnal. Por aquí la cosa está bien caliente.
Oiga, no le voy a hacer nada.
De espaldas te pareces a él.
Todos nos parecemos de espaldas. Mi mamá quería que me fuera. Casi nunca le mandé nada.
Las cosas no andan como para estar hablando con desconocidos. Levántese. Tenemos que irnos. No voy a volver hasta encontrarlo. Aquí se está perdiendo mucha gente. Algunos en el cruce y otros cuando los regresan. Es que mi hijo puede estar muerto, pero yo tengo que saber. Si usted sabe algo, dígame.
Cum e posibil ca oameni care au ieșit de acolo să moară după 12 zile?
Deci, practic, ei au ascuns lucrurile astea, da? Dacă nu spunem lucrurilor pe nume, suntem complici. Povestea e atât de halucinantă încât mi-e teamă că o să pare nebuni.
Sunt ministrul Sănătății. Dar primul lucru pe care trebuie să-l faci ca să câștigi sau să recâștigi încrederea cuiva este să încetezi să-l minți.
Omor oameni.
Nu ne putem permite treaba asta.
Și cum ne se poate rezolva chestia asta?
noi am avut o încredere oarbă în autorități.
Iar ce vedem aici, de când am venit, dar tot ce-i sub este putreț.
În momentul în care presa ajunge să facă reverențe autorităților, autoritățile se vor purta rău cu oameni, cetățeni. Întotdeauna se întâmplă asta, pretutindeni în lume, s-a întâmplat și în cazul nostru.
Welcome to Labor Goes to the Movies. This is going to be a fun conversation. I think have we all seen My Darling Supermarket?
Oh yeah. Yes,
good. All right. And then what else? Some of us saw the movie on Wednesday night, Identifying Features.
Yes, that's something I'd like to focus on.
Okay. And then, I watched Quo Vadis, Aida, thank you. Did you watch that, Elise?
I caught a bit of it before I passed out.
The problem was I watched it and then I had to do a deep dive to remind myself of all of the history there, which I thought that I knew, and I knew some of it, but so that wound up, I think I spent another hour and a half diving into that. So there's that. And then one other one that I watched. Anyway, that's enough to get started with. Let's start with My Darling Supermarket. And I specifically invited Peter, who, for those of you who don't know, worked for SEIU for many, many years. And we did a lot of events together. Peter wore a lot of hats.
A lot of street events too.
Street events, yeah. And then he wound up doing education for members on how to. You never taught them to do a January 6th kind of a thing, though. I don't know.
We were actually, as you will recall, kind of specifically trying to avoid that.
And you did. Anyway, I asked Peter to join us specifically. I thought that he would really get a kick out of My Darling Supermarket because Peter has become a Buddhist monk. I thought you were going to wear your whole robe thing, Peter. No,
I very seldom show up in that whole robe thing. It's first of all, it's really cumbersome.
Right.
And second of all, it's dressing up like something that is only a part of you.
Right.
Is not a good idea.
But I thought he would bring a good Buddhist perspective. And once you saw the movie, you saw what I was talking about, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's one specific reference to it, but that guy Santo, the guy that runs the forklift, he doesn't know it, but he's a Buddhist.
All right.
We talk about that in Buddhist circles, actually, that there are a lot of folks in the world who don't know it, but are basically living their lives along Buddha's lines, along Buddhist principles, which is not a very difficult set of principles. It's basically do good stuff, don't do bad stuff, and pay attention.
These seem like good guidelines. So, I mean, I was really surprised at how much I loved that movie. It made me, given the fact that actually nothing happens right. I mean, it was another reason I thought of you, Peter, because it's a movie in which nothing. Well, I mean, some bread gets made and some shelves get stocked.
It is the quotidian existence. That's the thing. It's day by day by day by day, by moment by moment by moment by moment, which is what we're all living.
Especially these days.
I'm gonna have to Google that word and look it up because I don't think I know what quotidian means.
It's just daily, basically.
Sure, that's what I would say.
And it's a lovely too long word to sort of capture the dailiness of our lives. The fact that most of the things that we do are the same things that we did yesterday and the day before and the day before. There's a great line from Ivan, the I'll call him Odd Baker, about going to work is like going out your bedroom door every morning. You just get up and you do it.
So let's
go on.
No, I want to. Well, let me get just sort of your sort of top of mind thoughts about it, and then I want to go around and get responses from everybody, and then we can just sort of open it up. So, what's your basic response to the film, Peter?
That you've got a bunch of folks who are really pretty deeply alienated by the work that they're doing, to go to a Marxist interpretation, and have come up with a whole bunch of really interesting ideas about how the world really works, that really seem to form it really seems to help them just get through the very dailiness of their lives and the very boringness and the very the fact that the way that the filmmaker gives us repeatedly these overheads. Here's what the ceiling is like. Oh my God, this is the ceiling in this place. This is what they're surrounded by. They're surrounded by all of this colorful stuff. And then behind the scenes, we've got the storage areas and the busted concrete and everything else. They're living in a movie set or working in a movie set, which is about selling things. Selling things mainly because they're very colorful and arrayed in great numbers and things. And they're trying to figure out ways, even if they don't understand that that's what they're doing, trying to figure out ways to make sense of it all. Because it's not, there's no sense in that space other than sell, move, fast. So that's my take. Loved it.
Evan?
I'm always interested in going into the background of the people who produced the film, and the director is a female, and she got the idea late at night when she was going to a supermarket, and she overheard a conversation with people just stocking a cereal shelf, and they're talking about love, and that kind of gave her the inspiration about these two people who are doing this monotonous task, but having this very deeply profound interaction on this level about the universal and the eternal. And it's the type of movie that comes across as very surface, but then it has all of the just human existential questions going on within it, and the interplay between the characters. So.
Elise?
I had probably the opposite reaction. I felt like we take it for granted that these are mundane, boring jobs because it's repetitive and doesn't. But that's the majority of work for the majority of people in the world. Like, there aren't people who get to sit at home with their Black Lives Matter T-shirt in the background and their cup of herbal tea, talking to a couple of brothers on a fucking computer. Excuse me. And so here are these people who are doing these things that we take for granted. They're there in the background all the time, but inside they have a rich inner life, which of course everybody does. Everybody does. It doesn't matter what kind of work you do. I mean, I was a nursing home worker, dumping bedpans and, taking people to the bathroom and making sure they're putting their meals in front of them and brushing their hair in the morning. And for the people who were getting that service, it was the world to them, right? And so even though I was doing it every day, I'm the van every day. And I thought that way, I think that way about my mother who cleaned the homes of the wealthy, my father who worked in the nastiest, dirtiest jobs in the Ford Rouge plant, that, you do all that, but when you come home and you have a life and you have a rich inner life and some people's creative life. And I thought what she did was she took this, what is really mundane and turned it into this colorful land of visual stimulus that was like, wow, that's how the supermarket there. But I'm like, I'm there because I'm like, oh, I know this person. I know this person who talks like this. And I was reminded of my theater classes when I was teaching at the National Labor College, and we would have a discussion after a film, and inevitably the guy who was like the the class clown would say something really profound, and everybody go, Doug? And then they would turn to me and they would say, why are we talking like this? You did this. And I'm like, I didn't do anything. I just taught you like the basics of theater, and then we went to see a show. And now because you have a context, you could talk about it, that you understand it. And even though Doug didn't finish high school and is working some mundane job, Doug has a brain. And that brain is capable of going into places that he doesn't get to express in his daily work, or she doesn't get to express in her daily work, but exists there.
I so reacted the same way, Elise, as I think actually everybody except Evan, because Evan's not been to all the coffee shops, and we haven't had that. Evan and I met, this way for the last year, so it's been this. But you guys have been to all the places, and that I always talk to the folks behind the counter, especially places like Teaism, where I know Sarah and her kids, and
our wonderful Thursday relationship with the folks at Filter.
That's right. And the engineers at the station. I always talk to the checkout clerks at the supermarket. Mostly because I always thought, God, there's a lot of jobs you think, oh, that would be an interesting job. I thought, to me, just to stand there in the one place. And a little side note, did you notice that the checkout clerk there did something I've never seen anybody in this country do? He was sitting down. I have never seen an American checkout clerk sitting down. I need to talk to my friends at Local 400 to find out what the deal is. There must be something going on there. But it was when Lisa came, Lisa stops in when I'm watching these things, and I was like, check this out. What's weird? She's like, something's weird. I don't know what it is. He's sitting down.
Yeah. He's also the guy who very specifically says, I like this job,
but
I get lots of variety in the conversations that I have and things like that. He's also the one that had a nervous breakdown.
Right. I wanted to talk about that because, in this context of what we're talking about, that I did not see that coming. He seemed like the guy that had it all kind of figured out, and then you find out he's the one who had a complete nervous breakdown, weeping, and which is honestly what I always thought. Like 10 minutes in that job, and that would have been me. You know?
Whereas Ivan the baker,
he's got it figured out.
That costume.
By the way, when they remake this in America, that he and his friend there are going to have a romance, right? They're going to screw the whole thing up. There's going to be it's going to be a whole other thing.
Sure. Yes, the relationships in the movie really they're very real. That banter behind the deli counter that goes on. Oh my God, they capture her so beautifally.
No, whatever he says, no. That's her way of just sort of getting right, Elise, getting her sort of peace, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you see at the very beginning of the film, they start off with, first they start off with basically in the beginning was the word. And somebody talking about words make things happen. But then the first words that you sort of see in the management office are the things about, what was it? It's about do you think you'd like to work here? What are your goals? What are your dreams? These are management questions that are just being put up there before anything else. These are what the managers are asking of them, and then we never see that again. But we've been told basically that this is something that management is concerned about, which I have a little difficulty believing. But then we are shown what people's goals and dreams and how they like it actually are in their daily activities. I loved that little subtle bit of we're going to show you what management says, what they ask, and now we're going to show you what actually goes on without any regard to management anymore.
Yeah, I don't think we ever see them again, do we?
No, we don't. We don't.
And Elise, I was thinking about something you said, because one of the things that occurred to me was that it kind of turns, like in a regular movie, and especially in a supermarket, right? You would have something to do with the customers. I mean, your customers are a big part of what's going on there, and their background at best, they're really bit players. I'm thinking particularly the repeated scenes, at the in the bakery where the character will be holding forth, and then somebody's there and he's like, and he'll deal with them and they'll come back and they'll pick right up, but you never see the customer. There's no interaction, and he pays them very little mind. And it sort of, to me, was, I think, going to your point, which is that she was not interested in them. She was interested in the workers.
Yeah. Well, it makes me want to also go back to what Evan said, and I want to read more about the director, because I, of course, didn't read anything about her. I was just taking the film in, and how she chose. I mean, this is the thing about film, right? It's subjective. You get to choose the focus. You get to choose which way it's going to go, and why she chose that. What's her background? Where does she come from? What's going on here? So I'm going to have to go back and do some more research.
I think Evan's our researcher.
Yeah, I mean,
I love that.
Supposedly she, her previous film was on a ballerina shoemaking factory. Wow. With a bunch of men. And then she was at the supermarket, kind of had the idea of having this one set theater. And she started doing a lot of research and started interviewing, and all the people in the film had no background being on camera before. So over a course of selecting people, she was interviewing a ton of people at this one supermarket she was spending a lot of time with. And from that, she selected, the six-ish main characters. And I think something that she wrote too, she wanted to start off with the set of a very dehumanized, depersonalized supermarket. And by the end, it's this very personal interaction of just human existence.
It made me think of Working too, the film Working. And who do you choose as the subject? Who do you choose to be the, luck of the draw? I mean, or what is her skill that she's able to say, oh yeah, that's the one. Okay, let me get that one. And how much filming did you do before that?
Yeah.
Figure out who would be best.
But I mean, there is obviously there is that, but don't you get the sense that one of you said this? I mean, we all have these stories. Everybody has these stories, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I think every one of us here are people who talk to folks, and sometimes it's a little hard to pull those stories out. And Elise, as a teacher, and Peter, I know you've worked with thousands of members, and I'm sure there's always somebody sitting in that class who's like, I ain't gonna talk. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
and then they do.
That's
your job. But I also loved the sequence where she's got Santo, the forklift guy, talking about the fact there's no interest here. Who would care about what's going on in a supermarket? Maybe my wife, maybe my son. And then he goes on to some of these wonderful, wonderful riffs about life, the universe, and everything. And it was just so beautifully played. He was quite the serious character.
Putting him at the beginning,
like I said.
Yeah, putting him at the beginning was I thought brilliant, because he really, I think it, I was thinking myself when I read about this, I was like, really, a movie about people in a home? I mean, I could see that as a 10-minute short. I mean, how are you going to do an hour-and-a-half movie? It'd be about, and there's no drama, nobody falls in love, nobody gets killed, there's no robbery.
That surprised me.
Well, it didn't surprise me. That's when you suggested that I watch this movie so that I could talk with you all about it. I thought, inside a supermarket, that's just great. I mean, I worked in retail a few times in my life. I worked at a paint store where you're stocking gallons and five gallons of paint in the back, and it's that same kind of a thing where you got just these crappy old shelves in the back, and out front you got this glorious, colorful stuff. And they hated the fact that I was terrible with customers because people would come in and want to talk about what color their dining room ought to be. Lady, I don't know what color your dining room ought to be. That was not the approach I was supposed to be taking.
Marigold, definitely marigold. That's the color.
But I was fine in the back.
Well, you know, in the warehouse, when I worked at the University Seller Bookstore, which was the student bookstore at the University of Michigan, and we had a warehouse that was out away from the bookstore because the bookstore wasn't big enough to hold the stock. And the warehouse was this place that was, you know, like, it was like, you know, being sent to the outer limits or something, you know.
Yeah. Let me guess, that's where they sent you, isn't there?
Right. But the forklift drivers were like the top of the line in some way. And this one guy came in and he changed the whole atmosphere of the warehouse. And they started doing this thing where they would do ballets on the forklifts.
Oh, and, get out.
Yes. on the opening
this story
day,
doesn't end well, I don't think.
Student book rush. We would rent the ballroom of the student union, and they would bring in the books, and we had to build the shelves and all this kind of stuff. And one year they came in doing the hustle. I think the hustle had just come out. And with the forklifts and everybody, and bringing in the boxes, do the hustle, do the hustle, and it was just,
I love it.
It was like a Broadway musical, right? Only it's not Broadway. It's not a musical. It's just regular human beings, you know, at this point, you know, 20-something-year-olds, you know, who were like saying, nah, we can do something more with this. And that's there in everybody, that potential, that creativity.
I think I see your next labor opera.
I was thinking.
I would pay to see people doing forklifts, doing the hustle.
You know, and it's like, oh gosh, yeah. And you had the cabbie, right? You have the cabbie that you know you're driving in New York or wherever in New York, and the cabbie starts talking. You go, whoa, where did that come from? Thank you very much.
All right, we've heard about some backstories on jobs from Peter and Elise. You got to give it up, Evan.
Well, my first job was a retail job at a small store in Muskegon, Michigan, Western Michigan, called Coach's Closet. And I was 15, and it was essentially a soccer accessory clothing store. And like Elise said, you have it, or maybe Peter said it, you have it very nicely manicured in the front house, and in the back house, it's total craziness. But some other jobs I've had that were much more dynamic with people are all the restaurant jobs I've worked, and just the amount of funny things that happen in the back of the house. And as you're dealing with sometimes very difficult situations, difficult customers, but you just build this incredible interplay and dialogue with your fellow workers. And even in something as boring as a restaurant that, you know, everyone goes to and seems like there's nothing going on, but the people working in the restaurant oftentimes form a very dynamic, cohesive unit. And then there's also the us against them mentality of management versus the servers. And then there's, you know, the servers front house who get treated usually better than the back house unless you're an actual chef. And yeah, you learn a lot from those experiences. So people who haven't had those experiences, you know, I sometimes look at them when they're talking about life experiences. I'm like, well, you have this whole missing part of you that most people in the world have experienced. So.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point. I worked in restaurants too, and very quickly discovered I actually wanted to work in the front of the house because that's where the money was. But I got and the thing is, once I was in the back doing the cooking, partly I think I fell into, you know, there was this definitely front of house, back of house kind of, you know, thing. Plus, you could do shit in the back of the house you could never do in the front of the house. I mean, including swearing, okay, which kind of for me was a big deal. I was like, you can't fucking swear with the customers, okay? I mean, maybe these days in certain hip restaurants you could get away with swearing at customers. I don't know, but that was that's I think one of the things for me that the film, especially compared to the other films, and Evan wants to talk about Wednesday's film, this film, for all of its, you know, seemingly about nothing, and you know, it doesn't, you know, any of the things that you would expect, and no romance blossoms, you know, there's no action. I wound up feeling incredibly, first of all, just happy. It's literally the reason I thought of Peter was that I knew that Peter as a Buddhist would, even though there was just this little reference to Buddhism, the whole film felt like a Buddhist film in terms of like pay attention, you know, and if nothing else, if it gets people to look, and I think maybe people are already doing that in the pandemic because we're all spending, you know, A, more time in the supermarkets, and B, appreciating that somebody is there stocking them and checking us out. And also, interestingly, you know, the fact that they had to put up these barriers, you know, for the checkout folks. And I think this is just me. This is, as Elise likes to say, this is just the story that I'm telling. But I think that before, I don't think people really paid attention to the checkout people, right? They were just, you know, get your stuff, get out. I think that it kind of, in my mind anyway, once you put these barriers up, I think it makes you pay more attention to the folks who are behind the barriers. Maybe that's just me.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to say simply because I've always paid attention to the checkout people. I go to the checkout line even if there's a long line at the checkout and the self-checkout is wide open, because you get a chance to actually interact with a human being.
But I don't know if that's the introversion versus the extroversion.
Yeah.
The extroversions want to have that connection with the other people because of the energy. But I also was thinking about the cashier in terms of, you know, you can't judge a book by the cover. And what we see is only the tip of the iceberg of what the whole human being is. So here's this guy cheery and, you know, engaged and in that way that, you know, some cashiers, I could think of one that was in the bookstore who was always engaged with folks. But underneath is a whole mass of other things going on. And you can't see that by just looking at somebody.
There was another vignette in there that had a very similar effect for me. The young woman who was stocking shelves, and then she goes back into the break room, and she's looking at her phone, and there's the pictures of her pregnant, and the pictures of the baby, and the pictures of her when she was a teenage ballerina. And it was like, it was just, that can't have taken more than about a minute and a half in the whole movie. And it encapsulated that, exactly what we're talking about, the rich life that everybody brings in and that we miss to our own, really, I mean, it's something that if we were able to engage each of those people the way that movie maker has, how much richer would our own lives be?
Yes, and that's the power of film.
Yeah, it really is.
That editing piece is the magic that I I wasn't conscious of until I started talking to Chris. But just that juxtaposition of those photos, it says a whole bunch that you can't do in a theater piece.
Yeah, that's right.
You just can't go that far back and then come back to the present. And then, and just what? I don't know, how long? Was it a minute?
It may not have even been a minute, all told. It was just such a beautiful little piece of filmmaking.
Yeah.
We got to get into the interactive theater, though. You know, we can start doing some projections and things like that on the stage. And
it's true.
Yes.
Right.
I thought that when I saw Thurgood, the play with Lawrence Fishburne, and they just had a legal, law school legal table, long legal table, and two chairs, and that was a set, and everything else was projected on the screen. And as a theater person, I was like, oh, well, that's kind of simple set. You can use your imagination. But those photographs changed it. Made it a whole different experience. Plus, Larry Fishburne was way more talented than I had given him credit for. I liked him on film, but I wouldn't have said, oh, yeah, genius. But he was powerful as a young, middle-aged, and old Thurgood Marshall. But that's the
wow.
Sorry, I digress.
No, it's all good.
No, not at all.
Yeah. The other thing I just want to mention, and I want to get to the film from Mexico, but I also love it. I think Peter made a reference to it. I really liked, when they'd have the shots of the butterfly or the spider or the lights or one of my favorite, I even made a note about it. I loved it so much. There was a shot of a dirty water in a bucket. that is one of the most beautiful things I have seen this year. I'm not kidding. I mean, and you know what it is. It's not like they say starting close, so you don't know what it is, and then they pull out. You know going in because you see the woman mopping, and then it goes to the bucket. And I remember watching that, thinking, I mean, I hadn't read anything about the filmmaker, but I knew that this person was a genius because she had to see that.
Yeah.
Nobody came and told her about that, you know, that I mean, you have to, or maybe she worked, you know, it's something that you would have seen as a worker, maybe, I don't know. But to see that and to realize that to me, it worked on so many levels. I mean, it was such a beautiful image. Surprisingly, you know, it's not even clean water. It's dirty floor mopping. And then again, Peter, I thought of you because as a Buddhist, I mean, you guys like to scrub floors on your hands and knees with rags. You don't want no Swiffer, man.
It's not necessarily liking it, but that's what we do because that's how you actually get the floor clean.
It's not just about getting the floor clean, though. It's about a process.
That's right. And I mean, one of the classic things that we always tell new folks is when there's an intensive retreat, the senior student at the retreat is basically leading the whole thing and in a position which could be considered to be very high up. The senior student is the person who cleans the toilets every day.
Just to kind of keep things in perspective.
It keeps everything in perspective, and it's also a statement for everybody that there's nothing special about any of us.
I'm thinking of some places we could apply that to good use. I mean, what if we made congressmen clean the toilets?
Yeah.
I mean, it is Good Friday in the Christian calendar, and Jesus did wash the feet of his, disciples and prisoners and things like that. So maybe get congressmen to wash some homeless people's feet or something like that. Very interesting.
I love it. Good luck with that.
Revolutionary, Evan. I see where this is going now.
I mean, if they want to call themselves Christian, we can like.
I was there with you. I went right there.
Exactly.
I went right there.
Wait, I thought you liked Jesus. No?
Just one final little note that I loved also was she did a shot. I think it was a tracking shot across a bunch of signs that had the prices on them. And then she cuts to the backstage place where the guy is making the signs.
Oh my God.
Sweep.
Oh, freehand.
Yeah, freehand. It was gorgeous, just absolutely gorgeous. And then later in the film, she gives us him doing some actual art back there. Yes. It's the very same desk, and he's doing his own art. And it was just another one of those little vignettes that just gives you the richness of each life that is in that store. Yeah, I loved it.
Good.
I could go on and on and on, but that's not what we're here for. So
it is. So what I want to do is I want to bring in a film that I know Evan and I saw, and Peter and Elise may not have seen it yet, and some of our viewers may not have seen it yet. So Evan, we can't give away the crazy twist. The crazy twist, which I'm a guy who sees twists coming a mile away, and I did not see it. So we can't give away the twist, Evan, but can you just sort of give a quick sort of what set up the movie? And then I just want to hear your reaction. And I think there are things that you guys will be able to play off of as well.
Yeah, and I also added a link in the chat as well. It's essentially a movie of a mother trying to find her son, and the son is leaving his mother to go to the United States from Mexico. And time passes, and one of the son's friends turns up dead, and she goes looking for him. And so you see the entire immigration north story as she goes to the border. And then there's another story happening at the same time of someone who's just been deported from the United States going back to Mexico, and it's not her son. And so there's these two parallel tracks happening at the same time. And it has some of that magical surrealism that, like Gabriel Garcia Marquez style but it's not, it's very subtle. And it also has just some very deep emotional aspects of good versus evil. And you have very real evil that we read about in the newspapers that you can actually kind of see, and there's a lot of fear and suspense, even though there's not big chase scenes or anything like that. Yet at the same time, there's a lot of people helping the mother along the way, trying to find her son, or at least have closure if her son is dead. That's just a general overview. I don't know, Chris, if you want to add anything.
No. I mean, unlike, it was interesting because I'd seen the supermarket film, which I just felt like I just had a Buddhist session with Peter, was feeling very relaxed. And then I watched this movie, and every muscle in my body, and it's a similar, as Evan says, most of the movie, again, not much happens. It's not one of these shootout. I mean, but I mean, there are gangs everywhere. There's tension. What I really liked about this film was, especially in this particular moment that we're in right now, where the right is ginning up the anti-immigrant, rhetoric, about people coming across the borders, and this film, I think, does a really good job of putting you in. If you want to understand, why are these people leaving their countries? Why do they leave? I mean, her son leaves. It's a pastoral scene. The place where they live is gorgeous. He's got a job. He's got his family. He's got everything there. And if you want to, but there is no life there. There's violence and there's poverty. And this is what's missing from this so-called debate about immigration, right? Is that, why are, all of these people leaving their homes? It's not because they want a Mercedes-Benz and a 3-car garage. That was, but it is an incredibly, the actress, by the way, you probably did some research on her. I don't know who she is. I've never seen her before. She is absolutely, she does so much with so little, right, Evan?
Yeah, and I mean, when you say there's no life there, I would add there's no future.
That's what I meant, sorry, yeah.
And what's the future in the place where the economy is just, completely being wiped out? And beautiful cinematography, amazing acting. Also a film that was directed by a woman and was written by the director and another woman. And it also has this, I don't know if you picked up on it, but the son's name's Jesus and the mother's name's Magdalena. So it has that kind of surreal quality going on as well. When you're looking for something of just, beautiful filmmaking, but emotionally powerful, and maybe if you have anyone who is hard-nosed about immigration, try to drag them to this film to watch it.
Yeah, and did you sort of react to some of the other sort of things that it raised for you, Evan? Because I think you were one of the folks who was there, had some really good comments in the chat. I think, frankly, the chat normally is kind of blowing up with comments and so forth. I think everybody was just sort of stunned. I mean, there is this major plot twist, but it's also just a film that it's stunning in a lot of ways, I guess I would say.
Yeah, and as a man, obviously, I'll never have that connection a mother has with their child, but it's just so emotional the entire time. I obviously have spoken to my mom about, her view of children and everything else, and just that bond and that idea of like protection of the mother and the child. And you're going through that entire process as she's trying to find her son, and it's extremely emotional. And and it's just this unspeakable violence and the violence of the coyotes and the cartels, and they're battling in this space, but it's evil, it's a lot of evil, but it's obviously surrounded by this complexity of this evil Babylonian system that is drawing these people around and pushing these people around. And to be honest, I sometimes think about the violence in Mexico and the deconstruction of the state. We may see that in our lifetime in the United States, where there's roads we can't travel without going through some militia checkpoint. And I mean, we've already seen it in Nevada and elsewhere. And I don't know, it's just very powerful. Everyone should see it. And it's beautiful filmmaking. And I'm looking forward to seeing what else these people produce, the director and the writer.
Now, Elise, since you also watched Quo Vadis Aida, we should talk a little bit about that. And I also watched Collective, which is, I'll just say this about that, get it out of the way. I had to actually watch it in two pieces. I think it's too long. It's a great film. I think it's one of the ones that's Oscar nominated. I just think it's too long. Especially for American audiences. And I'm a huge film person, but it felt, and it's an important film, and actually would really love to have some of my newspaper guild. It's really a film for our folks, Elise, as a news, because it's really about the power of the media and the power of the press. But I mean, it's in a foreign language and it's really, really long. And it's mostly footage of people in meetings or press conferences. So it's not, it's one of these ones, actually, I'd love to see it remade as a drama because it's dramatic as shit. You got bad guys, you got good guys. I mean, it's a great story. I appreciate, and Evan, it'd be a bit, I think you'd enjoy it too as a media person, but I just think
I saw the trailer and it's about the nightclub fire in Germany, right?
Actually, not Germany. It's Romania. It's actually about what, and I did not know this. I knew about the fire, but it turns out that more people died because there's this whole corruption going on around diluting disinfectant, and so more people died who got burned, who went to the hospital, and there's great footage of people with maggots on them, but so I knew about the fire. The fire turns out to be sort of just the outside of the onion, if you will. There's this whole corruption thing, and there's this bad guy who did the bad stuff with the disinfectant, but then there's all this government officials who won't. It's just layer after layer after layer, and so it's an impressive piece of filmmaking because it really makes an attempt to peel back all these layers. But to me, it just kind of limits the audience of what I agree is a very important story. But I mean, I don't know, at least if you have a different take or another thought on that.
No. What this discussion has triggered for me, it's like I want to do an investigation of women directors. And no, seriously, because the Quo Vadis Aida and the one we were just talking about set in Mexico, the title just went out of my head. As Evan was talking, I was thinking, what happens when a woman goes behind the camera? What happens when it's different? And I remember when Catherine Bigelow got the Oscar. She's the first woman to win an Oscar. I'm not sure if I remember.
Sounds right.
But I thought, The Hurt Locker? You got an Oscar for The Hurt Locker? I mean, I could think of other films by other women that were so much more to the heart, which is what we're talking about in these films, which are also the head. Our heads engaged, but also the heart. I mean, the mother, the son, the Jesus, the loss, separation. When I saw that woman's face in Quo Vadis, Aida, I was just like, oh God, Mama.
Rip my heart out.
Right? And so when I hear you talking about the other film, I was like, oh yeah, that would just be. And so these women are choosing this, and as opposed to The Hurt Locker, it's like, okay, all right. Let's look at some more. I mean, let's look at some comparisons and see what's going on. What does that mean? Does it mean?
I'm actually trying to get the president of SAG-AFTRA, who's a woman, Gabrielle Cateras, on this show in the not too distant future. We could talk to her about that. But I checked on this recently, and Evan, you may have it off the top of your head, but even with all of this Me Too and all of this pushing for the last few years, the number of women directors, it's up, but it's still way, way low. And also your question, which I think is really even more the point, is even if there are more women directors, I don't think they're all getting to choose projects like what we're talking about here. I think they have to, if they get in for a variety of reasons, commercial and having to prove themselves and so forth, they're probably having to take on projects like The Hurt Locker, things that are going to be money makers, as opposed to, the films that we've been talking about. These are not big box office films, right? These are films that people want to make because they have stories that they want to tell. But My Darling Supermarket, which I like, I would love every local 400 member to see that movie, right? I mean, I would love every union member to see that movie because, right? There's so many reasons why that's problematic, right? Starting with the fact, I will just tell you, it's been amazing. My dad shows films like this up in Rochester, New York, and we'll get 300 people. But every time we do a foreign language film in DC, which you would think, is a more cosmopolitan, it's full of people from other countries. It is a lift. It is a lift to get folks out, unless you tap into the Romanian audience or the French audience or the people. Anyway, that's a whole other piece.
Yeah, one comment, Elise, a good friend of mine, she wrote her dissertation on 3 female filmmakers coming from Iran, Pakistan, and India, I believe. And just going through Bakhtin time was kind of the other layer on this dissertation, and what the females chose to look at and how they expressed concepts through the film. And I totally agree that, we're all people when it comes down to it, but then at the same time, women bring a much different perspective than men. And I think that's something that I'd love to see what you're going to uncover when you pursue that. So.
When you and I work together on this.
Sounds good.
I was also thinking about, what was the film that was about the Justice for Janitors campaign?
Oh, Bread and Roses.
Bread and Roses, right.
Ken Loach.
Right, and again, he threw in this love story, right, between the organizers and one of the workers, and I really felt it was gratuitous. And then we just observed in these films, there's no love story going on here. There's no rockets going off. There's no car crashes. There's no car chases, right? Just the storytelling of someone's life in real time.
I think that it's that humanity point, which really is the point here, that there are so many more aspects to each of our lives than our love life. There is so much more that we can relate to in other people's lives than who they're with. It's much more about, it's much more interesting, at least to me, to know how you engage with the world. How does what's going on in the world affect you? I want to hear about this. I want to know about, about what is life like for you, not just what is your love life like.
But I think, though, and we're all consumers of culture, right? And we all know, I love mysteries. I love detective stories, right? And I was talking to Peter about, at some point, we're going to have a discussion on this show about, the labor aspects for Foyle's War, which I watched over the pandemic. But in Foyle's War, one of the things, this is an example, one of the things that in every show, and it may be 10 minutes in, somebody is going to die. Usually some couple of somebodies are going to die. That's just a given, because that is that show. Somebody is going to die because there has to be a death, a murder, even if it doesn't, it's a murder mystery. So somebody's going to die. And so you have these tropes, and Elise, you in theater, and you have done. Remind me, what's the story of one of your labor operas, right? Love songs. So the value of tropes, right? These are a lot of Shakespeare is about love stories. So it's not there's anything intrinsically wrong with love stories, but if you're going to make a film about supermarkets and you're not going to have a romance, what you're asking people to do is to pay more attention, because we're not going to give you an easy hook. Will the baker and and his colleague get together? Won't they? We're not. Will the guy have a breakdown? Won't he have a breakdown? Like in a drama, you would have give a little tease a little bit at the beginning, and then again, so there are reasons for these tropes, but I think one of the things, all the films that we're talking about, you got to work harder, right? As a viewer, and what do we know about viewers? We don't.
But I think that's the quality that we're seeing in some of these directors, though, is making it less hard work for us to do something different, to see something differently. That certainly, I think, is the achievement of My Darling Supermarket. It's just that who would have thought? I mean, we've all said that. Who would have thought that a documentary about a supermarket was going to be as moving and as powerful as that film is? That's because of the superb work that director did, and that the camera operators. I mean, a lot of stuff. The camera guy was just obviously, or person, probably quite likely a woman actually, was out there shooting ceilings and floors and those wonderful tracking shots across all of the things, all the stuff that is in that supermarket and all of its color and glory. And at the beginning, we saw the shelves empty. Nothing in them. Remember that pure white? And then they start putting the things on, and then through it, we see people rearranging the stuff on the shelves, making the presentation even better. And I mean, there was just so many things that made you stop and think about what it is that you're actually encountering when you go to the supermarket.
That I'm glad you reminded me of that. That there's one of my favorite scenes is that scene. It's fairly early when the guy is working on the shelf, right? And again, as somebody who watches a lot of movies and sort of, and Elise, because you've had to think about that, there's this rhythm in a scene, right? So in a normal one of those scenes, that would just be a setup for something to happen. Something's going to happen. That scene, I don't know how long it goes on. It feels like a couple of minutes. All the dude does is adjust, these little packets, and then, and it goes on, and you're thinking, okay, where's the payoff? What's going to happen here? And then you realize, ain't no payoff.
Or this is the payoff, because this is what he is sent out there to do. Yeah, I love that bit.
I am curious though on the effect of all these box office, big films are almost all superhero action. It's almost like the child, little boy, big explosions. The hero comes in and solves everything at the end, and there's always this happy ending. And it's not it's so far from reality. And it in some ways, it is an extension of the escapism that so many people are seeking in life, because life is becoming so unbearable for so many people, and having a superhero. And a lot of the people I'm hanging out with are a decade younger than me, and they're all into comic books and anime, and they're into a lot of these, Marvel movies, which I personally, find very uninspiring and they may be entertaining, but I'd rather spend my time doing other things. But that question of how is that, where's the labor in that, Chris? Where's the labor?
No, I think that's, it's sort of the antithesis, if you will, of what we're talking about, right? And what I think I worry about is there's a lot of talk about the effect, and if people want to blame, like whether it's comic books or, whatever, that it causes things. I don't know that that's the case, but it does definitely seem, like it desensitizes people. And I know I read a lot of stuff about how, the army had this trouble getting people to kill people because people basically don't want to kill people. It's really hard for people to kill people. And the way that they do it is by essentially getting you to practice killing people, and it gets easier and easier. And I do worry, that the effect of seeing lots of big, boomy movies. I think about taking somebody who's used to watching a movie like that and asking him to watch My Darling Supermarket. I think 5 minutes, I think they'll be done after 5 minutes. They're like, what's when's the supermarket going to get blown up? Right? I mean, it's. If you think about, and this would be a whole other show, but if you think about how all of us learned to watch movies, the four of us, right? I think about this, like this week, I watched more foreign movies this week than I've watched in the last couple of months, right? I mean, because they're work. I mean, you know, I like watching Foyle's War. There's a murder, you know, and at the end of the show, it's resolved, right? At the end of every movie I saw this week, no shit was resolved. Yeah. No shit was resolved. And I had to work really, really hard. One movie I had to watch over 2 nights, you know? So, you know, that's asking a lot of folks. This is a language that we have had to learn as pretty dedicated movie watchers, right? But if you grow up on a diet of the kind of movies that Evan's talking about, you know, it'd be interesting, Evan.
Which I did. I mean, I did grow up watching Rambo and Commando and, you know, all the 80s movies with Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger, and my dad liked Charlie Bronson, and, you know, these.
Man, you've come a long way, baby.
Yeah, I know.
I think there's an interesting thing going on here. I'm going to date myself because I grew up watching World War II movies because that was, I was born in the 40s myself. And a lot of that carried into my generation's war. That was what the kids who went to Vietnam had been exposed to. That's what we had seen. And, you know, it didn't take me but about 3 days in boot camp to understand that that was a big lie. And here I was committed to the Navy for 4 years. But I think that's something that we could do an entire history on what the people who went off to fight each war had been acculturated to before they went off to fight it. That'd be a really interesting study.
We could do that. We'll do that. All right. Go ahead, Elise. You get the last word, girl.
No, because my mother never watched television.
Wow.
She wasn't so popular as anything, and she would come in sometimes and turn off that TV. I don't care if Jesus is on there. And one, I don't know what movie it was, but it was a World War II movie, and my mother said, they're getting ready to start another war.
Oh, wow.
I was like, huh? And she said, that's what they do when they're going to start a war. They start showing war movies.
Your mom was a wise woman, woman.
Wish I'd been told that a little bit myself.
8th grade education. She knew.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey, what a pleasure.
Thank you, guys. This was a wonderful, and as always, Elise, it went in all kinds of, you know, unanticipated directions. So keep watching movies, guys. We're going to have you back on. Evan, I'm thinking we should have some of your younger folks on. I'd love to see what get them watching some movies.
Not just us geezers.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a great
Thanks,
Friday.
everybody.
Get the movies.
See you at the movies.